You're listening to Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetees.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetees.com. Guys, check us out on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. If you enjoy the podcast, go on iTunes.com and log in and leave a positive review for Out of the Box Podcast. We love the ratings, the positive ratings. They're awesome. But what we love even more is if you go on and leave a positive review or comment. That helps us out a lot more than just leaving a rating. So we would love that. And as always, you can visit us at outoftheboxpodcast.com and click on the donate button. We are now accepting Litecoins, Bitcoins, all alternative currency. And you can also shoot me an email if you have any questions for the podcast at info@outoftheboxpodcast.com. I'm here today with a very special guest. She is a spiritual counselor, therapist, and has some books available online. She's a new thought leader, Jennifer Hadley. Jennifer, how are you?
I am excellent. How are you, Rosie?
Awesome. You're in Hawaii, so that's like really nice.
It's very nice. Yes, I'm in Kauai, and it's beautiful here. I just moved here last spring.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little. I forgot to mention, Jennifer, I have a lovely co-host who's my dog.
Ah, sweet.
And she'll be barking in the background from time to time.
Fantastic.
So you have your website, and you are a spiritual teacher and therapist and minister, and you also are inspiring people off the internet with some of your daily inspirations. How did you get involved in something like this? Because a lot of times when people go on a spiritual journey or have this type of path, it's unfortunately rooted in some type of backstory or pain or something that kind of motivated them to wake up.
Yeah, well, I was definitely an unhappy person, and I back in my 20s, and I'm 55 now, back in my mid-20s, I was living in Manhattan, and I actually had a moment where I heard my ego say to me, "I hate you." And I thought, well, that's not good.
That's not good.
That's not good. Yeah, you can't just let that one ride. You gotta do something about that. And I would say I was an extremely egotistical person, just super extremely egotistical. And the way it showed up for me was I was so insecure that I walked around pretending I was superior to everybody. And I was often taking offense at everything. I judged everything and everyone all the time, and I was definitely the most judgmental person I'd ever met. And I, of course, was not happy. And as I was moving along there in that space, it was right before, a couple of years before the harmonic convergence happened. A lot of people started waking up then, and I was one of them. And so I started to feel like spirituality could be helpful to me. It could be an answer to me. I started to have an interest in it. And it just really began with things like reading Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb, which was hugely popular then. Everybody was reading it. And the spiritual journey that she talked about, I knew what she was saying was absolutely true, and I got inspired to do like she did and go to Peru and have my own amazing experiences on the Inca Trail in Peru. And I began to become more loving and more compassionate, and I decided, okay, I'm taking every goal off my goal list, everything off my to-do list, and I'm just going to have one thing there until I can cross that off. I'm not adding one thing. And the goal was to love myself.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yep, I made it the number one priority. And I was amazed that in a year I could say I love myself. Now, I couldn't actually say I was always kind to myself. I wasn't always loving to myself, but I could really feel like I was developing a kindness and a loving appreciation for my beingness, for my opportunity to have a human experience. And
I think that that's really important. And you said, I wasn't always kind to myself, but I wanted to love myself, because I think that's a lifetime practice. That takes, some people never reach that level.
It's true, and it's worth everything you put into it and more. It's like for every little bit that you can put into self-love, authentic self-love and self-care and self-patience, self-kindness, self-generosity, self-forgiveness, every little drip that you can put in, it's like putting in a huge bathtub full of goodness into your life. Not kidding. It is beyond comprehension how deeply transformative it is.
I want to talk about something that you said that's very, very, very profound and important, because I think a lot of people who are very judgmental, like you mentioned, tend to be very, very intelligent. And so they really don't, even though they know that their judgment, because judgment, comes from unhappiness, because you're judging everything. You're like you said, it comes from ego, right? And so a lot of times people who are very intelligent have a hard time letting go of that judgment and seeing that about themselves. And sometimes even, I've met many, many intellectuals like this, they will judge spirituality or religion or that emotional aspect of themselves. And do you think it's a way for the ego to kind of not move on from that?
No question about it. That's really well observed. So I'll tell you, Rosie, the intellect is a tool of the ego, not of the spirit. The spirit really doesn't need the intellect. So the intellect is always analyzing things, hence the criticism, hence the judgment. Whereas spirit doesn't need to analyze anything. Your higher self doesn't need to analyze anything because it already knows everything. So if you're in that analytical, trying to understand things, trying to figure them out, you're safely or unsafely, really, perilously identified with the ego. And one of the things that I teach in my classes, because I teach classes for people who are like me, who are interested in moving out of that ego identification and into really that communion with their spirit and living from their heart, living from the spirit. And it takes practice. You can't just read about it in a book. The ego will drive your intellectual, spiritual experience for as long as you let it. And what I realized was that that's exactly what was happening for me. I was reading all these books and taking all these classes, but I was approaching it as though spirituality was information, and whoever has the most spiritual information wins and is the most awakened, enlightened person. But that's so not true. It's just a crazy hamster wheel the ego tricks us into jumping on. And people who are smart and people who have a really well-developed intellect often actually are not that smart, because they let the ego convince them that acquiring information is going to make them a better person, but it just never ever does. How could it? The person who is the most loving, the most kind, the most compassionate, the most generous, at the same time taking good care of themselves, no one's taking advantage of them, they are the person who's really got it going on.
I cannot agree more. And I totally relate with you, Jennifer, because I'm one of those intellectual types.
Yeah.
And for years, I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was like, okay, I've been to therapy. I had like a little checklist. I said, I've been to therapy. I've read all the self-help books. I've done this. I don't get it. What's wrong?
Exactly.
I've read all the psychology books. I know like everything about psychology. I could psychoanalyze myself better than anyone else, yet the results were not there because I wasn't sinking out of my head into my heart. And that's something I think that's so important that you teach, because what intellectuals like me and you and other intellectuals that may be trapped in their ego mind don't understand is that we're holistic creatures. We have a spirit, a mind, a body, all of that. And so if you're not taking care of all that imbalance, you're out of balance, right?
Very well said. Yes, so true. So true. And you know you're out of balance when you don't feel harmonious, when you don't feel peaceful, when you don't feel open and receptive, when you can easily get triggered, irritated, frustrated, bothered by someone. That's how you know.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. I think it's great. It's so positive. And I noticed, a lot of my friends, or some of them who are still trapped in that thinking, it's about kind of demonizing people who are religious or spiritual as, hokey, wishy-washy, pseudoscience, blah, 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 blah. Yet they're not seeing the value in it. So I think it's really important that, intelligent people speak out and say, hey, this is not, if you have a spiritual understanding, that doesn't mean you're an idiot. It just means you're using a different part of your, I don't know if psyche would be the best word, spirit, energy, a different part of your holistic being, because there's different parts of us. So I think,
when I tell you, when I am completely aligned in my heart and I am talking with someone to be of service, not trying to get anything. I don't need anything from them, and I'm not trying to prove anything to them. When I'm just there to be of service, if the person that I'm meeting with in any way, shape, or form, like you and me right now, Rosie, then if that person does ask me, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? How would I solve this problem? How would I work to bring this about in my life? What I find is my open-heartedness and my no attachment to getting anything from the person. It opens my heart and my mind in such a way that divine insight, you can call it intuition, you can call it inspiration or insight, whatever you like to call it, but it pours in, and the answers or the solutions become so apparent, so readily apparent. And so people who are laboring to figure things out with their intellect and who are judging, you can just really ask them, are you authentically happy? Are you authentically happy? But you know what? The thing that I've learned is that like attracts like. So, for instance, I used to have conversations all the time with people who didn't agree with my point of view, my perspective from a spiritual perspective. And they used to challenge me, and there were attacks, and they wanted to argue with me and have those kinds of conversations that are really just an argument,
And they're not really listening to your point of view, but they're pretending like you're having a debate, right?
Exactly. And they're very intent on winning and showing that you don't know what you're talking about. I find that I don't attract those anymore.
And I wanted to put something very important to what you just said and emphasize what you just said. Is you said when you're being open-hearted, when you're shifting from that analytical ego side into your heart and serving the person, then the answer comes forward. Well, guess what? Albert Einstein, one of the greatest intellectuals of all time, actually talks about what you're talking about. He, regularly said when he would get stressed and frustrated with his scientific studies and not being able to get an answer, he would go and be with God. A lot of people say, no, Albert Einstein was an atheist. No, he talks about the universal energy in many of his writings, where he would go and be with nature, go take a walk on the beach, go clear his head and let go. And the answer to many of his scientific puzzles would be given to him.
Exactly. It's right there. That's why I say in my classes, if you're trying to figure something out, if you're trying to understand it, then you're doing it from the intellect because your spirit already knows. If you're willing to relax your mind and say, higher self, spirit, I know that I know, help me remember.
And that
help me recognize the truth. And then if you're truly willing and it serves you, it'll just pop right in.
And not just in science, in art, that's where creativity comes from, is that openness.
And everything, it applies so much for me One of the things I do a lot of is relationship counseling, because relationship is one of the main places where people have a tremendous amount of confusion and distress, and they make interpretations of their relationship experiences to affirm their belief that there's something wrong with them. So I do a lot of relationship counseling, and a lot of times people are trying to figure out, well, what is it he really wants? What is it she's really thinking and feeling? What's really happening in this relationship? They're just desperate to understand it, but they're going at it through the intellect and not through the heart. And a lot of times when people if I say okay, just take a moment, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, place your hand on your heart, and just ask the question gently, what's really motivating this comment that they said, or this choice that they made? What's really happening there? Invariably, most people, even if they're not really a spiritual student, they will get the answer that's true. And then they're coming at it from a different place, and then they can realize, oh my God, it has nothing to do with me. It's just about them. Oh, I didn't even see that. And then they can open in compassion. And then sometimes they can go back to their friend, their loved one, whatever, and say, hey, I got really offended when you did this or said that. And I realized, this has nothing to do with me, really, does it? And maybe you need some extra love and care right now. Instead of me taking offense and being mad at you, maybe I could actually love you and support you. How would that work for you now? And people will be like, wow, that's a twist in a relationship, some real love.
I think a lot of things can be healed from love. And sometimes when we butt heads or have arguments, like you said, that's the wrong tool in the tool belt, because we're going ego versus ego, and that doesn't really solve anything. And so I think a big, like you said, affirmation of love or hugging that person with your loving energy can really shift the mood, coming from kindness.
Exactly. I at times I have worked with teenagers, for instance, and the teens that are raised today, they're being raised with all these role models of people who are super sassy,
I
right?
think I know some of these role models you're talking about.
Yeah, really super sassy and sarcastic, which I used to be, and I could always get a laugh that way, and now it's just not my way anymore, because it's always unkind. There's no way to be sassy and sarcastic and not also be unkind. So
there's always a victim, whether you're making fun of someone or you're making fun of yourself. Someone pays a price. Yeah,
exactly. And that's just I'm training my mind out of that. But I remember talking with someone once, a teenager, and they were saying that their friend just stopped talking to them, and they were hanging out in this other clique, and they were so upset. This was their friend since childhood, and they really missed their friend, and they also felt like their friend was totally dissing them, and it was just a big ball of upset to this precious person. And so she said, so I just decided, what has she done for me lately? I don't need her anymore. She can just talk to the hand or whatever. And, and so I just said to this precious girl, wait a second. Is that really what you want? Is that really what your heart is saying? I said, what if you went to her and just authentically said, you've been my friend my whole life. I love you. I adore you. Your friendship is precious to me. Something's going on. You've been disregarding me. You've been ignoring me. You've been disrespecting me. Something's going on. And it's not you. I know it's not you. What's really going on? And do you really wish me to not be in your life anymore? Like, just be direct and say, is something going on? Do you need some extra help or support now? What's really happening? And that's the thing that most people won't do. Instead, they go into the intellect and they just keep speculating and making interpretations and meaning of it that are often completely wrong. And I'll tell you, Rosie, one time I had a date with a guy I really liked. I was excited about this date, and it was going to be like a first kind of a, real like night out date, not a coffee lunchtime hang-in date, but like we were going out. He was taking me out, and totally no show. And I just went into, if he thinks he can treat me this way, and how dare he, and I'm never going to, and my mind went to all of that. And the next day, he called me and he said, I am so sorry. I actually had a thing that happened, and I had to go to the hospital. I was in the hospital overnight because my body went crazy, and I had to call certain people, and I didn't have my charger with me. My phone ran out, and I realized, oh my God, I have a date with Jennifer, and I don't have any way to tell her that I can't, that I'm in the hospital. And so, of course, I said to him, well, honey, I just knew something terrible had to happen, or something wonderful, because you're such a good person. You would never stand me up. And I, like, whoa, I guess I don't walk my talk, So that's how I learned these things. I learned these things because I used to just completely walk away from relationships and just tell people to F off. So I learned the hard way how to create a big mess of your life.
And it's very important that you mention that, because the ego will make up stories to serve your negative belief systems, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. So, explain that a little bit, because you talked about justifying belief systems and proving that, for the listeners who might not understand the lingo we're discussing, because this is not a self-help podcast. I'd just like to have interesting guests on, but
yeah. Well, a lot of people, you hear the word karma, right? And you hear negative karma, positive karma, and a lot of people don't really know what that means. They think it's luck.
Yes, I know a lot of people that think it's superstition or luck, or, oh, I don't believe in that stuff, and they don't understand the psychology behind it, right?
Yeah, and I would say it's the spirituality behind it. So here's what I believe, and that is that, let's say I believe in reincarnation, and that's what karma is all about. It's about, so if you don't believe in reincarnation, you wouldn't probably believe in karma. But for those of us who do believe in karma, we believe that the choices that you make in one incarnation, that the choices you make for love will bring you benefit, and the choices that you make for fear or anger, resentment, that kind of thing, what's going to happen is, in another lifetime, in a subsequent lifetime, you're going to have an opportunity to revisit those choices and decisions you made. So let's say in one lifetime you are mean and cruel to your children. Well, maybe in the next lifetime you will have a parent who's mean and cruel, or likely to be mean and cruel. And the thing is that I believe we pick that person intentionally. So it's not where
so that we can raise our consciousness level and learn that lesson.
Exactly.
Or pay back that debt or whatever.
Exactly. So what it really is, and I'm a student and a teacher of A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles says all forgiveness is self-forgiveness. And that's why, because the experiences where it seems like somebody is doing something mean or bad to us, it's really an opportunity for us to be loving, patient, and kind with ourselves and with others in this kind of a circumstance where in the past we weren't. So we get a chance, like if someone is attacking us, let's say in this lifetime we're the one being abused by the parent, we actually have a chance to forgive ourselves by forgiving our parents. And in doing so, we can literally transform the world. And so we've seen people in this world, like Martin Luther King Jr. is a wonderful example of that. He taught loving your enemy, which does not mean taking their abuse, but not hating the hater. He said, basically, if you hate the hater, no good can come from that. But if you can love them, not loving their actions, but just love them as a being, and not in not in relationship with them, then maybe you just see them on television. If you can just send them love, ultimately there's the opportunity that they will move into their heart, being drawn there by your loving heart, and they can actually be redeemed and stop doing what they're doing.
So
And
maybe, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jennifer. So maybe, for example, if you see a child molester, having empathy or compassion for that person and saying, hey, that person must be in a lot of pain to be doing the things that they're doing. Is that kind of along the line of what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a really good example, because a friend of mine is a sign language interpreter for the deaf, and he would get assigned to go and interpret for the deaf in all kinds of situations, court cases and government things, and he was doing sign language interpretation in a support group for pedophiles.
Mm.
Okay. And he did that for a couple of years. You can imagine what he heard and what he learned. And one of the things he learned after 2 years of doing sign language interpretation for a group of pedophiles every week, every single person in that group had been sexually abused as a child. Every single one of them. I don't know what the statistics are on pedophilia, because I don't know anything about that, really, honestly. But that just struck me as so amazing how this very often the people who are mean to their children, their parents were mean to them.
Yes, and I think you're saying that the spiritual aspect of it, of dealing with that karma or dharma, but also there is a psychological and existential kind of reason, because I know a lot of psychologists talk about if you don't heal or work on your childhood issues, then you keep repeating them. For example, women who have abusive fathers end up being attracted to abusive men. So it's all, like I said, this holistic package of let's work on ourselves and heal ourselves, and also heal those around us, like you said.
Yeah, and from a spiritual perspective, that same thing of, if you don't heal the pattern that's showing up right now, then your higher self has to recreate it for you. Because if you don't move into compassion and forgiveness now, and forgiveness really is to drop the judgment and have compassion. And compassion doesn't mean condoning. It's just really opening your heart and saying, look, I have behaved badly too, and I can understand that sometimes we make choices that are frightening and horrendous and mean and uncaring and stupid and all that stuff. But so one of the things that happens is every forgiveness opportunity that's presented to us, it is an opportunity for us to learn the wisdom from the experience. And that is going to happen when we open our heart and open our mind to what's really going on. If we keep judging and say, this shouldn't be happening, this was wrong, this was bad, then either we'll keep recreating it by thinking about it over and over and over again. And I've counseled people who have gone over the same memories, the same painful memories, for at least 70 years. 70 years I've counseled people. So
that's like living in hell on earth.
It is. And that's what a lot of us do. And that's what I used to do. And then I realized, because I was a grudge holder, and my favorite joke is, what do you get when you cross an Irishman with a gorilla?
What?
When you cross an Irishman with a gorilla, you get a gorilla who holds a grudge. Because you take the dominant characteristics from each species. And yes. So I've told that I've done a number of forgiveness workshops in Ireland and in Northern Ireland, in Belfast and in Dublin, and they love that joke. So because they get it, it's the whole grudge holding thing. Look at the the whole, all the stuff between the Catholics and the Protestants there in Ireland. And actually, I'll tell you, back in the 90s, I really said, my dream is to go teach forgiveness in Ireland, and I got to do that. It was pretty cool. So
That is pretty cool.
it is. It's important to have intention in our life. It's amazing how things come around. So when we forgive, then we can actually harvest the learning from our experience and stop repeating it. And a lot of people don't know that. Instead, they close their heart. They say, being loving is too hard. Being in a relationship is too hard. All these things are too hard, so I'm going to close my heart so I don't have to experience the pain and suffering anymore.
And sometimes people actually punish innocent people because, for example, if you're in a relationship where you get hurt very badly, maybe you're in a new relationship with someone who's absolutely amazing and would not do any of those things at all to you. But if you have your heart closed, you may actually recreate that same situation by pushing them away or closing your heart or treating them as if they were the perpetrator, but they're not. Is that right?
Yes. And we've all had experiences like that, haven't we?
Yes. I want to talk about your forgiveness because that's really important. You talked about, the Catholics and the Protestants, and, there's, at least 10 or 20 examples I can just pull up right now, Palestine and Israel, all over the world where people have been fighting for so long, they don't even remember why they're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, your forgiveness principle is very important, especially right now in history for people to learn. And it doesn't have to be this crazy, civil war thing, because there are people that may be holding people in their lives right now, family members, ex-boyfriends, other people, quote unquote, what I call hostage, holding them hostage with their grudges and other negative things. And what are some of the effects of this grudge holding? I mean, obviously global warfare is one extreme example, but, maybe someone can say, oh, well, that doesn't relate to me. I don't, I'm not in a war zone. Right.
Well, it's beyond measure on a certain level. And because what I can tell you is for instance, indigenous teachings like Native American teachings, they will tell you that the weather is created by our energy of what we're holding and what we're energizing. So, and they will say things like where women are treated badly, the water dries up. And so you look places in the world where women are treated badly, and just look at how does the water flow there, Mm-hmm. And one of the things I see, having lived in Los Angeles for 20 years, is it's so interesting to me that women have become so much more empowered in the last 60 years, and yet what are so many choosing to glorify and do with that? The objectification of their body. Mm-hmm. So they're now, one of the things that's their sense of freedom is that they can be showing up on awards shows and magazines, on billboards and things like that, looking in a way that they are objectifying themselves.
What you're saying is people have become empowered, but we're still kind of evolving.
Oh, we're totally evolving. I'm evolving.
It's a process.
Evolving. Yes, we're all evolving. But the unforgiveness, Gandhi said it so beautifully when he said, be the change you'd like to see in the world. He said, I intend to be the change I'd like to see in the world. And so that's how I live. Gandhi is my teacher, King is my teacher, and I connect with them spiritually all the time and just ask them to lead me and guide me to lead a loving life. And it's not easy, it's very challenging, but it's so much easier than not living a loving life, because when you really lead a loving, forgiving life, you don't have regrets. You really have no regrets.
Why do you think so many people choose to hold grudges and not forgive? Do you think it's a lack of enlightenment, a lack of understanding of these tools? Or do you think it's because I know a lot of really great people in my life who are just so intelligent and loving and have an open heart, yet, some things they just cannot let go. Is that part of the lesson of the karma?
Yeah, it is. It's really themselves that they can't forgive on some level, is what I believe. And I know for me, having been such a grudge holder, I thought that taking revenge included my standing in a place of, I will never forget that you did this. I will always remember that you did this. And I had an epiphany and a healing because I was in a situation with my father. My mother was dying, and I was living with both my parents at that time. And fortunately, my life arranged itself so that I could go and live with them to help while my mom was dying. And it was the most stressful time in my father's life. And stress really plays crazy with your brain. When you're really stressed, your memory goes, and it just your whole life kind of goes upside down from it. And I found that I kept getting irritated by my father. And for me, it was very distressing. I thought, oh, gosh, here I'm a spiritual teacher, and I'm not having compassion for my father in the most stressful time of his life. You know, his precious sweetheart, my dear mother, is dying, and they've been together, you know, for 50 years, and he's out of his mind, and I'm still getting annoyed and frustrated with him. Like, what the what? And, you know, and so I did a spiritual ceremony where I went and I laid on the ground in the highest place near to where we lived, and where it was all stone, and I just laid on the ground. It was wintertime. There was snow there, and I brought the dog with me, and I said, I am not going to get up from this spot until I have a healing. I don't know what it is that I am with it's happening in my mind, that I'm still getting irritated and frustrated with my father and not having more compassion for him. And but whatever it is, I'm willing to release it. And it took a while, and I prayed and I prayed, and it might seem crazy to people, but I called the ascended masters, you know, Buddha, Jesus, Mother Mary, Kuan Yin.
Help!
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, everybody, everywhere in the universe. I called all the angels, everybody I could think of. I called upon the ancestors, and I said, I will not get up from here until I have a healing. You know, and I have tears running into my ears, and, you know, I was so totally, I meant it with my whole being. And what came into my mind was that when I was growing up, there were many times when I would fight with my father. We used to fight a lot, and he would try to control me, and I would have to do what he said because I was a child and he was the parent. And I was so mad, and I would say, in my little child's mind, I would say, I will never forget that you did this to me. I will never forgive that you made me do this. You know, and it might even be just something like I couldn't have the ice cream or whatever it was, you know. I was the grudge holder, and I could see in my ceremony there that I had at least 1,000
Of
grudges.
those examples that
Yes.
you had done as a child.
Yes.
And you had been repeating them for so long, they were probably just stuck in there.
They were. And so what I did was I literally said, okay, let me call into my awareness every child that I ever was at every age, every child that ever of my own beingness that ever made those statements of I'll never forget, I'll always remember what you did to me. And I said, I have to tell you all that the thing that will heal all of it, and the thing that you wanted in that moment, was you just wanted your father's total love. That's what you wanted then. And that's the only thing that will satisfy you now. And what I realized was what they were all collectively saying to me was, he's so weak now. Now is the time to take your revenge. He's down. You can totally take him now. You know, seriously, they were like, now is the time to exact revenge. Mm-hmm. And that's why all this irritation and frustration was coming up. But I said, that's not the answer. I know that's really not what you want. That will not satisfy you. Being right will not satisfy you. Taking revenge will not satisfy you. Making him wrong will not satisfy you. The only thing that will satisfy you is opening your heart and totally loving him and letting all these thoughts of revenge and unforgiveness go. And so I just literally said, let's let them all go. You have to trust me that I know what I'm doing here. Now, I'll just tell you, obviously neither of us planned for us to talk about this, but somebody must be listening that needs to hear this. So, Rosie, what I did was I went home from that experience. I just walked with the dog back to the house, and I said, I just thought, I'm going to just create an opening here because I was so pissed when I had left the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, does anybody want to play Scrabble? My father never plays Scrabble, and he said, I'd love to play Scrabble. So I was like, okay, something has shifted. And then what I did was that night when I went to bed, I said to the angels, I said, angels, I would just like to know unequivocally that all of this is over. It's just over. All this thoughts of revenge, my whole life, all this buildup, I just want to know it's completely over and done with. And that morning, the next morning, I got up, I went into the kitchen to make my tea. My dad was making his coffee. The sun was rising outside. And the first thing he said to me was, Jennifer, I just want to tell you, the problems that we've been having, they're completely in the past. It's over.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I didn't say anything about it.
You didn't tell him about the
No.
situation.
I've never told him. I
Yeah.
never told him. And so this is how life works. We're all connected. We're all connected. And there's not one thing any of us wants more than just to be in the flow of love. And so what I've learned is, like, I love to teach forgiveness workshops around Thanksgiving and things like that. And to tell people, if you would like to have a different experience in your family, you have to be the change you'd like to see in your family. And so when there's an opportunity to not take offense, to forgive, to start again, to reboot the conversation with love and compassion, instead of waiting for someone else to do it, you say, I'll go first. This is my great opportunity to practice this. I'd like to have more practice to be in my loving heart. And you know what? I don't take offense at things hardly ever anymore. And that's the gift I give to myself.
And you can shift relationships that have been stagnant one way for years and years, the way you've done with your father. I know I've shifted relationships with family members I've had, and they're still the same family members. It was, and I used to say, well, they're stubborn. They do this, they do that, they never listen. And it's my changing of myself that's actually shifted them. And now they react different to my reaction, because sometimes when we're coming from those past reactions of he did this to me or she did this to me, we're even acting different around them than we would than someone who's coming from love and forgiveness. Is that right?
So true. And I always encourage people in my classes, practice it. Pick one person that you have a difficult relationship with. Focus entirely on that. Focus on sending them love, letting go your judgments about them. You're going to watch that whole relationship will shift and change.
So listeners, just so you know, sometimes it's not as quick as Jennifer's shift with her dad.
Right. No.
Sometimes it takes a couple weeks or a couple months or even a couple years, but it does. The relationship does shift. And I want to also comment on what you said about you didn't plan on talking this today. That's why I never, ever plan questions with my guests. I just try to have an organic conversation, because as you said about being open, you never know what's going to come into your mind or your consciousness, or who is listening, who needs to hear this.
Yeah, it's so nice, because then whenever the class is extra good or my radio show is extra good, I always say, and people say, oh, thank you so much. I say, it's your listening. You pulled it through. So
that's so true. Let's talk about the power of prayer, because you, that's a big in your practice as a coach and a spiritual minister and therapist and other things. And I want to talk about the power of prayer, because some people think that, it doesn't work, or that, well, I'm not religious, or I'm agnostic or whatever, so prayer's not going to work for me. And I just think that's not true, because prayer is partially intention. Is that correct? Or correct me if I'm wrong, the way you do prayer?
Well, I would say that intention is prayer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because one of the things for you to it's interesting, because I've taught so many workshops on prayer, so many classes on prayer. And if I walk into a room full of people and I say, okay, um, let's say that my friend Nancy was just in here and she just left. And before she left, she said, Jennifer, will you pray for my cousin? And I say, sure, no problem. And oh, Nancy is gone now. And I'm like, okay, I was going to ask everybody to join me in this prayer for Nancy's cousin, but we don't even know Nancy's cousin's name. We don't know if Nancy's cousin is young or old or male or female, and we don't even know why we're praying. And when I ask these questions, I say to the room, do you think that the prayer will somehow be delayed or somehow malformed because we don't know their name, their age, where they are, or exactly what we're praying for? Or will the full blessing take place regardless of any of that information? And there's nobody in the room that says, no, you got to have the information or it's going to be like the mail's delivered to the wrong house. People are like, no, that stuff doesn't really matter. I'm like, yeah, that's right. It doesn't really matter. The words don't really matter. It's really, what is it that we're sending from our heart? So take that awareness and then realize if what you're sending from your heart is resentment, if what you're sending from your heart is fear, if what you're sending from your heart is worry or doubt or any of those things, it's a prayer too. And Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of Science of Mind, he said that a prayer is like a seed planted in the divine mind. And if you plant a seed that's a lemon seed, let's say, you're going to get a lemon tree, you're not going to get a tomato plant. And everybody knows that's true. And just like if you plant a seed, a prayer for prosperity, you're not going to experience drought. So the thing is that most people, when they are praying, they're like begging.
They're like begging God, please. And so that's coming from desperation, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, too, if you're coming from desperation, what are you actually energizing?
The desperation, the neediness, the negativity. Don't let this happen.
Exactly. I just needed to clear my throat, so I picked up my cup of spiritual espresso here to take a sip of it. Now, we're not in the same room together, but if we were, and you could see me with my cup in my hand, and I said, oh, Rosie, I would be so happy if I only had some of my spiritual espresso. Just some coffee would be so nice. I could be really happy and feel fulfilled if I only had some coffee. You would say, honey, look in your hand. You have it right there. You just take a sip, and then you can be happy, apparently. For God's sakes, what's your problem? Why don't you get it? So, the spiritual teaching is that the kingdom is pre-installed. Seek first the kingdom which is within, and all else will be added unto you. So the teaching that I offer in spirituality is, if you're trying to get stuff, and you're saying, please give it to me, please give it to me, please give it to me. Every time you say, please give it to me, you're saying, I don't have it, I don't have it, I don't have it. So that's what you believe, and that's what you're energizing, so that's what you're going to experience more of.
And I want to talk, I know that we're talking about spirituality, and I think that's awesome, and I am a very spiritual person. But I just want the listeners to know, who are maybe atheists, that prayer actually has a value for you too, believe it or not, because there has been so much research done and so many studies done that the words that you tell yourself actually create your reality. And so if you're praying to yourself affirmations or positive things or loving things, or like you said, energy, whatever, that's what you're going to create in your life. And this has nothing to do with spirituality. It does have something to do with spirituality, but if you're atheist and you say, well, I just don't believe in any of that crap. Well, guess what? There's scientific evidence that saying these positive things to yourself actually helps create a more positive reality for yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of double-blind studies in the medical world and things like that. You can go read Larry Dossey's books, and there's more evidence than you can possibly imagine. But the thing is someone who doesn't want to know that doesn't want to know that, and I understand that because if we accept that our thoughts and our words have power beyond what we are willing to accept, that's frightening. Because one of the things
Because then you have to take responsibility for all the good stuff and the bad stuff, right?
Hello. And
Is that why I don't have a
boyfriend? Yes.
No.
People don't want to, they don't want to accept responsibility for everything in their life. They want to be able to pick and choose. Oh, this is not my fault. This is my father's fault. This is not my fault. This is my ex-boyfriend's fault. This is my boss's fault.
Well, I was born a woman. Well, I was born gay. Well, I was born this. Well, I was born that. It's not my fault.
Or my parents didn't send me to college, or my father never really liked me, or I could have been happy, but my best friend betrayed me. My business partner ran off with my sweetheart. I mean, I've heard it all. No, I've heard things that you're like, wow, that's you went a long way to go to create that one.
That was a good excuse.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is the only thing that really is fulfilling is when we take responsibility for what's happening in our life, and then we, instead of looking at it and going, why is this happening to me, and crying about it, instead we can go, I wonder why this is happening. I wonder what benefit this could be to me. What is it I'm trying to learn? What is it that I can discover in this? It's that thing of, about the two kids on Christmas morning with the stockings?
I don't. Tell me.
Yeah, so you've got these two kids that go down on Christmas morning, and the first one grabs his stocking, and it's filled with horse manure. And he's like, oh, this is horrible. And the other one grabs his, and his is filled with horse manure too. And he says, hey, if there's horse manure, there's got to be a pony around here somewhere. And so it's,
Cute.
yeah, it's how do you look at things? And we get to choose how we're going to look at things. We get to choose, are we going to condemn people, or are we going to go, yeah, like attracts like. And one of the things I learned was, because in my family and in a lot of my relationships, if I was having a difficult time and I was snippy and sarcastic and things like that, people would get mad at me, understandably, and they would say, hey, I don't like that. I don't like you treating me that way. I don't like that you're upset now. I don't like that you're bothered and frustrated and irritated. I don't like that. And if you're going to be that way, I want you out of here, or I'm out of here. And so one time I was having that experience with a boyfriend, and I said to him, you know what? I just saw it. I was like, okay, I get that you don't like it that I feel this way, but you could help me instead of mirroring me. You could help me by doing this, saying, honey, I get that you're frustrated and irritated. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with whatever crap storm you experienced at work today. So just know I'm totally here for you, and I'm going to help you work through this and get beyond it, because I love you and I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me go anywhere. I'm on your side. And I said to him, now I might say to you, don't touch me. Don't touch me. I don't, no, not now. No, I just want to be upset. Right?
Let me be in my wallowing of misery.
Exactly. No, I want to enjoy the energy of being upset. And I said, but do this instead. Just put your arms around me. Don't let me go. And just say, I'm not going to let you go until you agree to let me help you. And then I know I would just melt like butter, and I'd be like, oh, thank you so much. You must really love me. Because back then, especially, I used to see myself as the evil seed, the bad seed child, the demon. And so when I felt irritated, I felt like nobody's going to love me. And then I would try to prove that by pushing everybody away.
How subconscious are some of these beliefs that we have? Because you talk about, you wanted to push everyone away. And I know some people that have some destructive habits that they're just blind to it. They just don't even realize that they're doing it. At least you had the common sense to say, I just need this right now, honey. I need this. Maybe some people were grown up in households where they weren't allowed to express themselves, or a lot of us were grown up in households where we were told to just keep it all inside or sweep it under the rug. So, what are some steps that maybe people can do if they have these subconscious beliefs that they keep validating, but they don't know where to start?
Oh, that's such a good question, Rosie. So, what my intuition tells me is this. First of all, in a spiritual world, which I believe we live in, there is no such thing as unconscious or subconscious. But I understand that. I understand that. It seems hidden. It seems hidden really only because we don't want to look at it. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to take responsibility for it, which is totally understandable.
Maybe it's too painful or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just we don't want to take responsibility for it, and it could be any number of things, but often it comes down to responsibility. We don't want to admit our part in it, or we don't want to.
Or maybe we're not ready.
Yeah, we're judging ourselves for having been bad, wrong, stupid. Like particularly for people who've been molested or raped or taken advantage of and things like that, they don't want to really look at, I made some choices that if I hadn't made those, I wouldn't have ended up in that situation. Mm-hmm. And so there's stuff that we don't want to look at. It's totally understandable. And I don't believe in blame. I believe in zero blame, 100% responsibility. So the way to take things from that subconscious hidden state into the place of knowing and being able to work with it and heal it is really from our loving heart. When our heart is willing, then the insights and the information, the awareness will come. But when we're blaming others or we're in judgment, it's going to seem hidden from us.
That is a good point. And I think that some people may look at forgiveness on a superficial level, but I think forgiving yourself, and you talked about that in the beginning of the podcast, is very much a difficult thing to do for so many, because like you said, we have to admit not our wrongs, but our responsibility in it with the forgiveness.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not fun sometimes.
Yeah. One of the things I've learned is that the way most people make themselves miserable and cut themselves off from the flow of abundance and love and all good things is just through being very, very judgmental. And one of the things that people tell me all the time when they come into my classes and I start giving them the tools to really recognize their judgments, they'll say, Jennifer, when I started working with you, I thought, I'm not very judgmental. I'm very loving and compassionate. And they're like, oh, my God, I realized I am intensely judgmental.
You're so funny. Because we all are very judgmental. It's just maybe some are not as aware or ready to take responsibility.
Yeah, and you can tell if you are, you're not lighthearted.
Yes. And that was something that I am still letting go of is the judgment, because I grew up in a very judgmental atmosphere. And when I first encountered a non-judgmental person, it was like my brain didn't compute.
Yeah, I get it.
I was like, what do you mean you're okay with that and it's not a big deal and it is what it is? No. This is a bunch of spiritual mumbo jumbo. That you have to, there's right and wrong, and we have to judge it.
I know, exactly.
What do you mean there's no right and wrong? You're just a sinner. No, and it's been a very bumpy road, but I'm getting there. I'm so upset because I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but we have to wrap up soon. How can people find you? How can people get, some of your positivity and positive energy, and maybe your newsletter or your books or coaching or whatever?
Yes, everything you can find at jenniferhadley.com. And on the topic of forgiveness, I have a free forgiveness workshop called How to Get Over It. And it's how to get over anything. It's really how to get over anything. And there's some real particular tips for people who are having trouble getting over a relationship.
That is a big
And
one. That is
it
huge.
it is so huge. It's so intense, and I know so much about that, having been a world champion grudge holder, and so that's why I say I'll just tell you briefly. I used to live in Manhattan, and I was walking in Central Park with my best friend, and I was complaining about my parents for the 50 millionth time, and and he said to me, "You just have to get over it." So I shot and killed him at the time, and
Your
no,
brain
I
exploded.
didn't. I didn't. My brain exploded. It wanted to shoot and kill him. It wanted to go like find one of those cops on a horse and grab their gun and come back and kill him. But what I did do was when I realized how to get over it, I made a workshop about it, and I give it away free. It's got very specific tools, and so many people all over the world have told me that they have listened to the workshop, done the tools, and things that had been just totally frying their brain for 10 years or 20 years, they let them go in a day.
And frying their soul.
Exactly.
And guys, go on jenniferhadley.com and sign up for that. I'm going to sign up for it. You know, it can be paralyzing. I had a relationship, it took me 9 years to get over. 9 years. And if I could have had if I could have had my life back after, you know, a couple
That's right.
days or hours, I would have been so much happier, because that was just my 20s wasted.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh,
So
my God.
Go on there, follow her on Twitter or Facebook or whatever she has on there. Go on jenniferhadley.com and sign up. It's absolutely free, and she has other wonderful tools.
Yeah, I write
on there.
daily inspiration and daily prayer, and I do free workshops all the time. In fact, right now, there's How to Stop Wrecking Your Relationships, the free workshop I did. So
Yes. So go on there. And Jennifer, you have been absolutely amazing, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us.
my joy, Rosie. It's been wonderful to connect with you. I loved your questions, and I'm happy to do this again anytime.
Okay, guys. Jennifer, you can find her at jenniferhadley.com. I'm looking at her website now, and it is spelled exactly like it sounds. And we'll also have a link on outoftheboxpodcast.com in case you're confused. As always, we are on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Guys, if you like the podcast, the best thing you can do is go on itunes.com, Out of the Box Podcast, and click on the subscribe button. More subscribers help our numbers, and they help more people find out about the podcast. As always, please, please, please leave a positive review. If you hated the podcast, go on iTunes and leave a negative review. It doesn't matter. Reviews help the podcast go up in the numbers, so that's all I care about. As always, I'm on Twitter at FunnyRosie, and this has been Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran.